Back like I never left. Ayy, back like I never left. Ayy, back like I never left. Ayy, back like I never left. But yeah, so today I just wanted to talk about something that many women struggle with, and something that I was very ignorant of until it became an issue that I was dealing with myself. If you're squeamish about women's bodies, if you don't like women talking about like their monthly cycles and blood and bleeding and things like that, this video is not for you. Don't watch it. Tune out with immediate effect. So in 2017, I was diagnosed with fibroids. At the time, I had vaguely heard of fibroids. I'd heard of a friend whose family member had fibroids, and they'd had fibroid surgery. My older sister had fibroids, but I really didn't quite understand fibroids, and I didn't think of it affecting me in any way, shape, or form. In 2016, actually, were the first time I felt the symptoms, but I didn't know that that's what I was dealing with. So first and foremost, the first symptom that I experienced with the fibroids was a heavier cycle, but it kind of crept up on me. So typically I had a very light cycle, like around 3 to 5 days, and I noticed that it slowly started increasing. So that was the first sign, was the length of my cycle increased. Also, like, my cycle was much heavier than usual, and that was very abnormal for me. That I noticed in 2017. But even at the end of 2016, I actually remember feeling like in my abdomen, I remember feeling like a lump that I'd never felt before. And I remember thinking, is this normal? What is this lump about? Like, has this lump always been there? And I kept feeling it, and I just didn't understand what I was feeling. And eventually I just forgot about it. I didn't think about that lump ever again. Big mistake. If you feel a lump in your body, you should go to the doctor. I didn't go to the doctor for like almost a year from the first time I felt that lump. So from that lump at the end of 2016, it moved into, those symptoms that I just spoke about, an increased cycle, a heavier cycle, and I didn't think too much of it. I honestly didn't think too much of it until it just started to get a bit out of control. So in 2017, I just felt like, whoa, like this is a bit out of control. I'm bleeding really heavily. This is abnormal. Literally having to like change my protection every hour. Like, it was just ridiculous that I'd never experienced that before, where I was like worried about having an accident. And then eventually around September of 2017, I was like, I can't take it anymore. And I went to a gynecologist. When I got to the gynecologist, she did an ultrasound. And she said, you have fibroids, and she said I had about 4 or 5 fibroids at the time. I mean, the first time I heard this, I remember just being very worried. First of all, I was very concerned about my fertility. Besides the impact of the symptoms, I mean, I had back pain, I had heavy cramping, I had heavy bleeding, I had a long cycle. I was always concerned about accidents, even just in the middle of the night, like just bleeding out in the middle of the night. It was just very inconvenient. But being diagnosed with fibroids made me think long term. I was like, okay, so what does that mean for my fertility? Because I've heard of people having fibroids and struggling to fall pregnant, dealing with multiple miscarriages, having hysterectomies. It was a very scary diagnosis for me. And at the time I was like, 26, 27? So I was like, damn, like, now I have to think about something that wasn't on my, wasn't at the forefront of my mind. I have to think about my fertility, and I'd taken it for granted up till then. Okay, this is not the best lighting, but my ring light broke because cheap Chinese imports, and it's nighttime, and I'm doing this at nighttime because I'm busy during the day. So that was in 2017. The gynecologist that I saw, it was a gynae at Sunninghill Hospital, and she like made me very uncomfortable, So I asked her, okay, so what's the solution here? What are we going to do? I've got 4 or 5 fibroids that are actually already considered moderate in size. So I think the fibroids were between 1 and 5 centimeters. Like, I think 2 of them were between 3 and 5 centimeters, and then the others were like between 1 and 3 centimeters. So I mean, that's moderate. That's a moderate size. I'm gonna try add pictures of like what 2 centimeters, what 5 centimeters, what 3 centimeters looks like. But it's quite a significant size. I mean, the size of your uterus is literally like the size of your fist. So having 4 or 5 fibroids that are like 3 to 5 centimeters each is like massively enlarging the uterus in a very abnormal kind of way. So I asked the doctor, what's the solution? There's no treatment, there's just surgery. She instantly brought up surgery as an option. I instantly felt uncomfortable at being cut open. And in mentioning surgery as an option, she said, she gave me the risks up front, which I think they just do as like a formality, as just to, dot their I's and cross their T's. She was like, if we do the surgery, there's a risk that you could bleed out, and then we would have to do an emergency hysterectomy. She told me that the fibroids might grow back even if they take them out. There's a high probability of them growing back. And the only option she gave me was a myomectomy, which is where they cut open the uterus and cut out the fibroids. So I was like, oh, hell no. So I went to a second gynecologist. And the second gynecologist, this is when I had already decided, like, I have to have surgery. I can't do this. I went to a second gynecologist, and he gave me an assessment. He just felt my stomach area, and he like was shocked. He was like, "Oh my goodness." He's like, you're basically essentially like four months pregnant. He's like, you feel like you're like 4 or 5 months pregnant. And he was like, you can't. He's like, you need to have surgery. You can't continue like this. It's going to make you infertile. If you don't get the fibroids out, it's going to make you infertile. And I was just devastated. And I remember crying. And it was decided in 2020. So remember, I was first diagnosed with fibroids in 2017. I buried my head in the sand for 3 years. Which I do not advise, but I buried my head in the sand for 3 years because I really didn't want to have surgery and I didn't want to face it. But in 2020, it became obvious that I couldn't continue like this, and I was backed into a corner and I had to have surgery. So the question was, what kind of surgery was right for me? And at first, all I knew about was a myomectomy. I didn't know about any other options for fibroid removal. I spoke to a friend and she suggested that I look into what is it called? A UFE. Now a UFE is a uterine fibroid embolization. Okay, and I'm gonna talk about that more in the next video.